No uplink, no signature. Just 3 perfect strike marks on the eastern slope delivered without warning, without error, and without a single name attached. Inside the forward operations tent, flight logs spun with missing data while a junior analyst rewound the footage again. A voice had guided those A-10s through fog and fire, but no one in the room could say who it belonged to until the hangar doors opened, and the quiet figure from Ridge 5 stepped in terrain grid, folded under one arm, eyes steady, name still unspoken. And then everything changed. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story intrigues you, please consider subscribing to hear more untold stories of extraordinary service and the heroes who walk among us, never asking for the recognition they deserve. Jessie crouched near the exposed root line, boots pressed into wet loam, her breath slow against the edge of her face covering. The humidity had already soaked through her sleeves, and the gear on her harness clung close with the stubborn weight of moisture and time. Across the clearing, 2 soldiers from the recon unit were checking a portable relay, arguing quietly about satellite lock and terrain shadow. Neither looked in her direction. The ridge had no name, only a designation. Ridge 5. A mid-altitude shelf tucked between 2 fractured elevations, thick with pine and low creepers, broken by clearings too narrow for rotor insertion and too wide for cover. The overwatch post had been carved hastily from an old fire break, now littered with foam packs, spent rations, and half-buried comm cables that had never been logged correctly. She stepped over a torn case of batteries and moved closer to the edge of the ridge, kneeling with one gloved hand on the dirt. Her fingers traced the worn fold lines of a laminated terrain grid, its edges softened by use. The center creased to a crosshatch of memory. The laser target designator on her harness had been marked as functional during last inspection, but Jessie already knew better. The cooling fins were scorched, and the internal optics shifted out of calibration with every small bump. She kept it anyway, clipped close and quiet. A symbol more than a tool now. Its weight was familiar. One of the soldiers called out to her over his shoulder, voice edged with casual dismissal. "Hey, Control, you good holding the checklist, batteries warm." His buddy chuckled. Not cruelly, just comfortably. Jessie didn't respond. She slid her map back into the pouch on her left hip and turned toward the tree line. The canopy filtered what little sunlight pushed through the upper cloud layer, laying a greenish haze across everything. Her boots were caked in forest mud, the kind that held fast and dried slow, not the clean-issue soles the rest of the unit wore. Her gait was quieter. She moved slower, not out of hesitation, but because she didn't need to rush. They had assigned her here as a fallback relay, a line-of-sight logger in case the forward team's signal failed. Not a controller, not a lead, not cleared for call-out. The briefing had been polite, but final. Jessie remembered the phrasing clearly. Observe, log, stay out of tasking pathways, unless explicitly directed. Her call sign wasn't even included in the operations packet summary. She had nodded once and taken the assignment without resistance, but she had memorized the terrain band on the flight over, sketched alternate elevations on the back of her ration card, converted the satellite drift tables to contour overlays by hand because the digital reference frame had mismatches. No one asked her to. No one had checked. Behind her, the recon team lifted their optics again. One of them cursed low under his breath. Another voice cracked over their field set, asking for signal confirmation. Jessie adjusted the gain on her backup channel, dialed down the white noise, and tilted her head toward the ridge beyond. Nothing came through, but her attention stayed fixed. Down the slope, the air had begun to shift. The tree line leaned ever so slightly from the west, not enough to register as wind, but just enough to catch in the mist and trace subtle lines through the understory. Jessie blinked slow. She adjusted her earpiece. A faint sound tickled through the static. It wasn't voice traffic, not exactly, but it wasn't just noise either. She crouched lower, hand to her radio's housing, tuning by feel. The uplink ID was faint, incomplete, possibly a bounce from a hold pattern circuit or a misregistered beacon looped from airframe bleed. She watched the treetops with steady eyes, then reached into her vest and pulled the laminated grid again. She didn't speak. She didn't report. She made a small mark with a pencil along a curve she had already memorized, just inside the 500 elevation contour. The others kept talking. Nobody else turned. The uplink faded as suddenly as it had appeared, but Jessie stayed still another few moments, listening. She had been told to stay out of the way, so she did. And now she knew exactly where they would look first when things went wrong. The day dragged in shades of damp green and restless air. Insects floated just beneath the canopy, caught in shafts of filtered light. Far down the ravine, a crow barked once and then went silent. Jessie adjusted the strap across her shoulder. The ridge offered no real cover, but she knew from the map that the slope just below her held a mossed-out rock line, one that would reflect thermal signature at just the wrong angle. She marked it mentally, then scratched a note on her glove in graphite. To her left, someone laughed again, this time louder. A third voice mentioned rotating the field pack to the lower camp. She was not invited into the logistics line. She didn't ask. One of the recon men passed her and muttered something under his breath about extra gear, not even pausing to see if she responded. She shifted her footing and checked the edge of her boot against the drop. 100.0 feet to the first tree shelf. She estimated. She wasn't guessing. She had measured it the night before by reviewing 2 separate elevation profiles in low light, cross-checking with a contour grid that dated back to last year's clearance drills. The newer map was wrong by nearly 15 meters. No one had noticed. Above her, a red-tailed hawk circled once and disappeared behind cloud. The air had gone still again. The silence was not peaceful. It was waiting. Jessie didn't smile. She pressed her hand against the dirt and felt the ridgelines pulse through her fingers. The first burst of fire came low through the trees. It was brief, controlled, and distant but close enough to shift the posture of the entire recon element. Jessie heard someone shout for cover, another voice barking grid callouts that cut short in mid-transmission. Leaves ripped free from the branches above, and a haze of dust lifted from the slope like the ground itself had exhaled. She pressed flat behind the edge of the root wall, her boots firm in the soil. No rounds hit near her position. The ambush had struck farther east, targeting the forward sweep team. Still, the comnet fractured under pressure. Fragmented signals echoed through static. Names snapped and repeated. Then silence. Downhill. Several figures scrambled across the contour trail. She could hear their gear slapping against vest plates, fast and uncoordinated. No one was calling formations. The fallback plan, if there had been one, was forgotten. Jessie kept still, one hand on the ground, the other securing her headset. She listened. The radio crackled once, faint and clipped, a partial call sign, then a tone unreadable. She cycled power and dropped to one knee, adjusting the channel bank manually. Her fingers moved without hesitation. It wasn't panic. It was process. The screen rebooted. The main display flickered, then cut. She flipped to auxiliary. The backup circuit hummed low but held. No one hailed her. To her left, the slope dropped off sharply. Fog had begun to rise again, heavier now, clinging to the undergrowth and curling along the shallow cuts in the terrain. Jessie watched it roll, silent and heavy. The visibility narrowed. The forest closed in. She crouched lower and opened her left pouch, pulling out the terrain grid. The laminate was smudged with dirt, the folds soft from use. Her pencil traced the earlier mark she had made, then adjusted it by 3 ticks to compensate for the angle shift. She worked in silence, aware of the cold creeping through her gloves. The grid was still accurate. She just needed to re-anchor. Somewhere overhead, the UAV that had been circling earlier was gone. The frequency for its control signal had gone dark during the fire burst. The forward team wasn't responding. The fallback relay hadn't activated. Her own designation didn't exist on any of the operational tasking sheets now floating through command. She hadn't moved. Behind her, a wind broke through the upper canopy and sent a sheet of mist tumbling sideways across the ridge. She didn't react. She reached into her vest, pulled the broken laser designator from its hook, and flipped the side panel open. The emitter was scorched. She touched it gently. It was still warm from earlier. Not useful, but not forgotten. Jessie set the laser beside her and returned to the grid. Her compass sat in the dirt nearby, its face half scratched. The cardinal letters had faded from years of use. Only the needle remained, still twitching slightly toward the iron ridge to the north. The radio gave a long, low hiss. She tilted the gain again, sweeping across the unused bands, searching for any pattern. The sky remained silent. The forest around her whispered in low branches and leaf tips, but carried no voices. No one was checking the ridge. No one had confirmed her survival. The op, she realized, was being rewritten in real time. They were listing Ridge 5 as overrun, scrubbing the mission, calling back the assets. She looked down at her map again and drew a slow, careful circle around the elevation mark she had logged an hour before the ambush. Her pencil paused at a ridgeline break. She tapped it once, twice. The strike line ran too close to a known civilian access trail. No one else would flag that. Another gust of wind curled the fog against her boots. The ground stayed soft. She shifted her stance slightly and slid into the hollow beneath the roots, clearing a flat space just wide enough to shelter. She tucked her gear tight. No one needed to see her now. She wasn't here to be seen. She was here to remain. Minutes passed. The sky began to dim under another cloud front, the light thinning into the gray that made shapes vanish in the corners of vision. Her hands stayed steady. She redrew 2 grid lines and adjusted for slope depth. Then, a chirp. Not loud, not clear, but real. Her head snapped toward the handset. The backup channel buzzed with faint modulation. She turned the knob a quarter inch, then a hair more. The signal sharpened. Her breath stayed slow. She keyed the mic once. No reply. She waited, then tried again. Ridge 5. Listener copy. Do you read her voice was level, low, calm? There was silence. Then, in the static, a voice. Strike 2 holding. Ridge 5. Confirm signal. We've got no target mark. We've got no visual. Jessie lowered the mic. Her hand hovered over the map. She touched the worn edge where the fog had soaked through. The others had left. She hadn't moved. Now, someone was listening. The hum came low at first. Jessie heard it before the canopy shifted, before the leaves trembled along the ridge's upper limbs. She had the radio to her ear, one boot braced against the slope. The signal repeated. Strike 2 holding. No visual. No laser. Negative mark. Jessie keyed the mic, her tone even. Strike 2. Ridge 5. I've got you on audio. Terrain is high density. No open burn. Do not abort. Stand by for blind coordinate feed. There was hesitation on the other end. She could feel it in the silence. Then came the voice again, younger than she expected, clipped but unsure. Ridge 5. Say again. You have a targeting solution without a mark. Jessie flattened the map against the dirt with her compass. The plastic creased edge to edge. She used a smooth river rock to hold the northwest corner and traced a bearing with her finger. Grid Alpha 3, offset 27 degrees west, elevation 670 at impact point. No laser, terrain-based only. Do you have a spotter visual? Negative. You're trusting math. The radio crackled. Somewhere above the cloud line, the A-10 circled tight. Its engines groaned faintly under the canopy, too distant for confirmation, but present now. Not a report, not a theory. Real. Jessie double-checked the slope lines and marked the angle with her pencil. Her boots dug deeper into the loam as she recalculated the depth band where the recon team had vanished. The enemy's fallback trail would be just inside the shadow zone behind that ridge. "Strike 2. Confirm ready to receive vector," she said. "This isn't by the book. Ridge 5. "I know." Another pause. She pictured the pilot checking his display, seeing no data, no infrared spike, no heat bloom, no strobe, nothing. Just a signal on backup frequency, and a voice giving instructions like it was standard procedure. She let the moment settle. Her voice didn't change. "From hold. Adjust heading 187. Descend to 600 feet above target contour. Angle 32 offset southbound. Confirm ingress blind with fire discipline on final call." The voice returned, sharper this time. "Are you command authorized?" "No." "You've got no mark, no spotter, and no uplink validation?" "I've got geometry. I've got acoustic trail confirmation from last contact. I've got wind drift on thermal. You want the strike or not?" Another long moment passed. Jessie didn't fill it. She kept her eyes on the paper, on the dirt, on the place where the map and the land met. The forest pulsed faintly with heat. No movement yet. But it would come. She tapped the paper once with the back of her pencil. That was where the first round should land. The voice came back, lower now, more centered. "Copy vector, 187, southbound sweep, no mark, confirming manual offset." She exhaled once, slow. "Cleared approach, I will call timing." "Roger, holding on your word, Ridge 5. The wind picked up again, curling the fog low across the roots. She tracked it with her eye, noted the shift. It would drag the dust east on impact, obscure visual. That meant her call had to be early. She adjusted her mic. "Strike 2, commit descent. Begin countdown from 10. Confirm visual of tree fall at eastern shelf." "Negative, still fogged. No visuals." "Trust the line. You'll pass over a hollow, then a redstone spine. Strike occurs between those features. I'll call splash window." She counted her own breath. The engines rumbled louder now, a subtle pressure against the chest. Jessie looked up once, but the canopy was too thick. Still nothing. Only presence. Her hand hovered over the grid. "Strike 2, 5 seconds to final. Adjust 2 degrees right. Confirm slight bank." The line buzzed. Then, confirmed, adjusting. She felt it then. A shift in the sound above. A new direction. More vertical. More real. The pitch changed. He was locked in. 2 seconds, she said, steady. "Still no mark," he said. She let the pause hang just long enough. Then she said, "Splash." No explosion. Not yet. But he would hit true. She had lined it clean. The silence stretched just 1 beat longer, and then the pilot's voice came through again. Almost quiet. "Ridge 5, I still don't see your mark, but I see your math. Cleared hot." The forest held its breath as the first strike landed. It wasn't the sound that confirmed it. Jessie didn't need the detonation to know. She felt the shift in the air, the echo against the ridge wall, the way the mist folded inward for a split second like something had inhaled. She didn't flinch. She checked the grid instead. "Splash confirmed, strike point within 3 meters, she said into the mic, steady as ever. Above, the engines of the A-10 peeled wide and pulled back into hold. The sound curled into the fog. Still no visuals. No one had eyes on target, but her voice came through the static like steel. "Strike 2. Begin second approach. Reacquire previous angle. Offset 5 degrees east to compensate for thermal crosswind drift. Elevation 715. Impact timing on my call." The pilot didn't argue this time. His tone came back low and focused. "Copy all. Ingress initiated. No visuals. Still riding your line." Jessie ran her finger along the edge of the laminated grid. The ash smear from her flare earlier had burned one corner, but the markings were intact. The map sat flat against the dirt, corners weighted with gear. She didn't glance up. She listened. The fog hung tighter now, choking out the sound of birds. Smoke drifted sideways from the impact zone, invisible under canopy but detectable by the air shift. Jessie noted the turbulence and recalculated. She toggled the mic again. "Adjust descent rate. Down 40 feet per second at mark. Down at 40. Copy. No ground confirmation. Do you still have eyes? I don't need eyes, she answered. I remember the terrain. A pause. Then the pilot said, Understood. The second strike hit harder. She felt it before she heard it. The rumble came through the tree roots, low and heavy, displacing the forest's rhythm. Jessie tapped the compass once. The needle didn't shift. She keyed the mic again. Strike 2, confirm elevation burst. Confirming. No visuals, but pressure spike on entry. Grid clear. Target neutralized. Jessie scratched a faint X over the second circle. She adjusted for the third pass. This one would be tighter, closer to the slope where the recon team had last pinged. Next strike danger close. Recommend holding above 1,000 feet until my mark. You'll descend on curve. Angle 13 degrees, bearing north-northeast. The pilot sounded skeptical, but there was no delay. You're flying it blind, he said. No, she replied. I'm flying it remembered. The wind shifted again, this time with a sharp curl. Smoke from the previous blast wrapped the hollow and began bleeding into the tree line east. Jessie took a breath, ran 2 fingers down the edge of her grid, and watched the fog fold over the last sight line. She marked the final point. Strike 2. This run will break canopy by 7 seconds. You will not see terrain. I will give you final timing and range. Copy. Coming online. The sound was closer now. Lower. The hum of the A-10's engines trembled through the tree trunks like tension made real. Jessie lowered herself to one knee and pressed the map against the dirt with her palm. She felt the shape of the land beneath it, the same way she had memorized it days ago. During drills no one thought she'd need. 2 seconds from hollow, she said. Nothing in visual, he replied. Keep going. 0 visuals. Confirm mark location. It hasn't changed. You're aligned. Ridge 5. We are danger close. I don't even know who you are. You don't need to. Confirm your altitude. 800 and closing. Still no terrain features. Jessie touched the grid again. Splash. This time the earth answered. The impact rippled through the soil like a heartbeat, muffled but absolute. The forest exhaled. Birds scattered. Even the fog seemed to lift by half a degree. Jessie heard the shift before the radio clicked back on. Direct hit, reading clear. She didn't smile. She drew a line across the third mark, boxed it twice. The dirt under her knees was warm now. Ash had drifted back through the canopy in fine flakes, resting along the edges of her gear. She shook it off and leaned into the mic once more. Hold at distance, sweep orbit. I'll give you a grid for BDA scan. The pilot's voice returned, but something had changed. No more edge, just awe. Who taught you to run a pattern like that? No one. I learned it alone. A long pause followed. Then the mic opened again, but this time it was on a different channel. Command, this is Strike 2. We've got grid hits across the entire eastern approach. Impact spacing consistent with confirmed hostile movement. All points neutralized. Request grid tag for fire control origin. There was static, then a voice. Confused. Strike 2. Say again. No fire mission was logged. Strike 2 came back sharper. I said, we've got enemy movement neutralized, and we've got one voice calling the shots from Ridge 5. Who the hell is that? The canopy held the smoke like a lid. Jessie could taste it in the back of her throat now. Faint, but gritty. The map had curled slightly at the edge where heat had lifted moisture from the soil. She smoothed it again and noted a 4th strike angle unneeded, but logged, and... You didn't stop at enough. You finished clean? Above, Strike 2 circled tighter than before. The next voice from him came mid-loop, breath behind the words. Ridge 5. We've got Bird 2 moving to stack on my 6. He's watching everything. Wants to know where your uplink is. There isn't one, Jessie said. You running sat feed. No, just dirt and bearings. A pause, then a low laugh. Not mocking, just stunned. Well, whoever you are, you just painted a kill box without a single visual. You've got the second chair asking if he should start taking notes. Jessie didn't respond. She folded the map once and wiped her fingers on the back of her glove. The fog was breaking just enough to show the corner of a burnt-out trunk in the distance. She marked it quietly. The battlefield was still adjusting to what she'd done. She didn't need to announce it. The forest stayed quiet after the last pass. The ground still held a low vibration, the kind that stayed under the skin and behind the teeth. Jessie sat back on her heels and let the silence settle. There were no more calls on the backup channel. Just static now. Even the birds held off. She folded the grid one last time. The top right corner was singed, the edge curled where flare ash had landed. She slid it into the chest pouch of her vest, the map warm against her sternum. Her radio battery hissed once, then failed entirely. She set it on the dirt beside her and watched the last of its indicator flicker out. The ridge was cleared. Downslope. Faint voices rose in pieces. Someone shouted for a med pack. Another called a name twice and got a hoarse reply. Jessie rose slowly. Her knees creaked, her joints cold from stillness. She retrieved a pair of scuffed boots from behind the tree where she had stashed them during the second pass. One of the recon team had kicked them free when scrambling under fire. She had seen them fly off, logged it, and made a note. Now she carried them in one hand as she started the descent. The path wasn't marked. The terrain gave no guide. She used the same bearings she'd fed to the A-10, moving slow, not cautious, just precise. The forest was raw from the strikes. Char scattered through the undergrowth. Branches sagged under heat stress. The mist, once heavy, had started to lift in bands. Jessie walked through it without pause. Halfway down the ridge, she passed a crater. It was exactly where she'd marked it. A ring of shattered shale outlined the impact. No wider than a personnel carrier, no deeper than her boot top. It hadn't scorched the trees beyond the designated arc. The spacing was clean. The strike had landed within 4 meters of her predicted offset. She did not stop to admire it. She simply noted the dust pattern and continued on. Further below, command traffic returned in bursts. She caught fragments of call signs, coordinate queries, repeated attempts to re-verify control logs. One voice mentioned the strike package. Another asked if air control had been restored. No one had an answer. A pair of medics passed her on the slope. They nodded, eyes wide but silent. One started to speak, but stopped. Jessie gave a quiet nod in return and moved past them. Her boots left clean imprints behind her, pressed deep into soft loam and ash. By the time she reached the forward post, the scene had shifted. Gear was scattered, but order was returning. Soldiers moved in pairs, rechecking perimeter bands and logging comms failures. A downed operator with a head wrap sat propped against a fallen pack, drinking from a cracked canteen. Jessie handed him the pair of boots. He stared, then laughed once in disbelief. "These mine." She gave a single nod. "You left them on the upper draw." He took them and said nothing more. Near the relay, an officer stood talking into a headset, scanning a handheld tablet with furrowed brow. "We don't have a fire controller on file for those coordinates," he said. "No grid-locked uplink. You're telling me the airstrike ran without JTAC validation." Jessie passed behind him, silent. 2 operators were watching the ridge. One of them pointed faintly. "That's her. That's the one who stayed up there." Someone else asked. She called it in. "I don't know. But Strike 2 keeps asking who gave him the grid." A few turned to look as she passed, but no one stepped forward. A tech specialist near the comm crate stared at his screen and muttered, "No recorded command approval. Fire control came from a blind circuit." Another replied, "But it hit all 3 strikes, dead center." Jessie kept walking. A corporal near the recovery tent stood straighter as she approached, uncertain whether to salute. She didn't slow down. Her boots brushed past empty ration packs and scattered thermal blankets. One edge of her jacket sleeve was burned through. She rolled it higher and secured the strap without breaking stride. Above, a faint buzz returned in the air. The A-10s were circling once more, wide and high. One of them peeled left, then steadied. Her radio was dead, but the command channel picked up the open call on loudspeaker. "Strike 2 holding perimeter sweep. Command, be advised. We are confirming 0 residual movement along the eastern draw. Request final log of fire control source." The line buzzed. Command answered, confused. "We show no uplink active." Strike Two's voice came back sharper. Negative. We had full vector guidance from Ridge 5. We were cleared hot on voice protocol. Pattern was exact. Another long pause. Jessie stopped just outside the supply tent and pulled a fresh canteen from the side pouch. She drank slowly. Someone behind her whispered something about the strike grid. Another person muttered the word blind call. A medic walked by and glanced at her wrist unit. "Do you need vitals?" he asked. "No," Jessie said quietly. "I'm good." The buzz overhead thickened as the second aircraft joined its wing. A new call came through. "This is Strike 2 to Ridge 5. Everyone turned slightly. Some faces lifted toward the canopy. The channel stayed open. "If you're still up there, I'd fly blind for you any time." The lights in the debrief hangar flickered once, then steadied. Rain tapped lightly against the high windows. Inside, the room held the quiet of exhausted authority. Screens glowed over scattered paperwork. A coffee cup sat untouched beside a tray of protein bars, steam long since gone cold. A monitor replayed thermal footage on loop. 3 strike points, identical angles, 0 collateral. A cursor blinked in the corner. No JTAC ID. Colonel Gaines leaned over the console, frowning. His voice stayed level, but his hands moved restlessly as he scrubbed the playback again. "There's no uplink confirmation. No logged request. We're showing voice-only control with no validation. I don't see any JTAC code assigned to Ridge 5. A junior analyst shifted in his seat, eyes on another screen. "Sir, we're getting chatter from the pilots. One of them's requesting identification for ground controller. Said someone guided all 3 strikes from the ridge." Gaines didn't look up. "There's no name on this console." In the far corner, an operator typed quickly, checking field assignments. "There's a woman walking in from that grid now, gears soaked. Names not listed on the live call sheets." Gaines finally turned. "Unknown call sign." "Correct, sir. But the medic said she walked in alone. Said she was calm. Still had her map in hand." The door opened with a slow creak. Jessie stepped into the hangar, her uniform darkened by rain, gear slung low across her shoulder. She didn't speak. She moved past a row of folding chairs, past the edge of the light pool where briefing officers murmured into their tablets. She placed a folded terrain grid on the nearest table. The corner was burned. Ash flaked onto the surface. No one touched it. One of the analysts looked up. "Ma'am, were you—" She raised a hand slightly. Not a command, just acknowledgement. In the background, the replay rolled again. Strike 2's voice came through the overhead speakers, clear and full of motion. "Ridge 5, confirm final mark. I don't see it, but I trust your math." A pause followed, then her voice steady, distant, exact. Splash. The room fell still. Jessie walked to the edge of the central table where the manifest was spread open. She picked up a pen and drew a circle around the grid line labeled Bravo Elevation. She wrote nothing else, just the mark. Colonel Gaines cleared his throat. "You coordinated that run?" She nodded once. "With what authority?" he asked. "With none," she replied. A few heads turned. No one laughed. The tech at the console typed her name into the mission roster. Nothing returned. He tried again, this time into the base personnel record. A line appeared. Confirmed Ridge 5. Jessie Calhoun. Joint terminal assignment temporary. Evaluation status pending. The silence held. Then, from the corner playback, Strike 2's voice returned, softer this time. Off-screen, between comms. That wasn't luck. That was Ridge 5, logged and cleared. Jessie didn't remove her gear. The shoulder straps were still buckled tight, and flecks of ash clung to her sleeves. One of the medics near the door moved as if to offer her a towel, then thought better of it. She passed the empty coffee cup on the table and set her gloves beside it. They were streaked with soot. No one had asked her to explain. They didn't know what to ask. Colonel Gaines looked back at the screen. The playback now showed the final approach from Strike 2's HUD. Blank thermal, no visual lock, just the mark coordinates drawn into the display manually. A circle, a line, a splash. He turned to the analyst. "Get me her original assignment slip." The young man scrambled to pull up the document. When it finally appeared, Gaines stared at it for a long moment. Support only. No uplink clearance. No call-out authorization. His voice was low now, not angry, just quiet. In the center of the room, Jesse waited without speaking. The rain continued to tap against the glass above, steady and soft. Someone turned down the volume on one of the consoles. The buzz of electronics filled the gap. One of the junior pilots leaned forward, watching the grid Jesse had marked. "How'd she do that without visual?" he asked aloud. No one answered. Another operator reached for the folded terrain map she had left and paused with his hand just above it. Then he let it be. No one touched it. From the rear of the room, the playback cycled again. Strike 2, low and clear. Logged and cleared. Sometimes. The person with no authority on paper carries the greatest responsibility in silence. Jesse was never cleared to lead, never invited to speak. But when the ridge went dark and every protocol failed, it was her steady voice that brought the mission home. With nothing more than memory, instinct, and grit, she coordinated what others called impossible, not for recognition, not for reward, because she knew she could, and that was enough. In a world that often overlooks quiet strength, Jesse proved that leadership is not about rank. It is about resolve. If this story moved you, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Take a moment to reflect on those in your life who lead without asking to be seen. And if you'd like to hear more true stories of quiet courage and extraordinary service, follow us here. There are many more worth telling.